The departure from the United States to Japan often begins with a quiet contradiction. The country is globally familiar through images, technology, and pop culture, yet daily life operates on rules that feel unexpectedly distant from American norms. Streets move with a restrained precision, public spaces hum without chaos, and even crowded stations maintain a sense of order that feels almost ceremonial. The contrast appears immediately, not through spectacle, but through absence of noise, of improvisation, of visible emotional urgency. Many Americans notice this difference in the smallest moments. Conversations on public transport are subdued or non-existent. Phones remain silent. Movements are deliberate, economical, and rarely intrusive. Where American cities often communicate energy through volume and speed, Japanese cities express intensity through structure and restraint. The atmosphere feels dense but calm, as if attention itself has been evenly distributed across every action. Early impressions are shaped by this collective discipline. Schedules are followed with near-religious accuracy. Apologies are offered reflexively, sometimes for inconveniences that barely register. Politeness is not an accessory but an infrastructure built into language, posture, and timing. For Americans accustomed to casual flexibility and expressive individuality, this environment can feel simultaneously comforting and disorienting. There is a sense of safety and predictability, yet also a subtle pressure to perform awareness correctly. As days accumulate, deeper cultural distinctions begin to surface. Independence, a core American value, operates differently here. Individual needs often yield to group harmony. Emotional expression is filtered through context rather than impulse. Silence carries meaning instead of discomfort. Where American culture frequently rewards confidence and verbal clarity, Japanese culture often values attentiveness, humility, and the ability to anticipate without asking. Common situations reveal these contrasts with clarity. In shops, interactions unfold as choreographed exchanges, refined through repetition. In workplaces, hierarchy shapes communication in ways that feel invisible yet decisive. Even leisure spaces reflect a shared understanding of boundaries. Many Americans find that personal freedom is not restricted, but redirected away from assertion and toward consideration. Over time, this cultural framework begins to influence behavior almost subconsciously. Voices soften, movements slow, attention shifts outward. The constant self-expression that defines much of American life gives way to a quieter form of presence. The culture does not demand transformation outright, but it gently conditions it, one interaction at a time, reshaping expectations of space, respect, and belonging. This adjustment is rarely conscious at first. It emerges through repetition, through the steady realization that the environment responds more favorably to restraint than to assertion. Many Americans begin to notice how often intentions are communicated indirectly. Instructions arrive softened by implication. Disagreement is expressed through pauses or careful phrasing rather than confrontation. What initially feels ambiguous slowly reveals itself as a different form of clarity, one that relies on shared cultural literacy instead of explicit statements. The rhythm of daily life reinforces this shift. Time in Japan is treated less as a personal resource and more as a collective agreement. Trains arrive exactly when expected, not as a courtesy, but as a moral obligation. Queues form naturally, without supervision. Public systems function smoothly because individuals assume responsibility for maintaining them. For Americans used to navigating inefficiency with improvisation, this consistency can feel almost unreal. As if the background stress of daily logistics has been quietly removed, social behavior further deepens the contrast. Friendliness exists, but it is measured. Warmth is expressed through reliability rather than familiarity. Smiles do not automatically invite conversation, and privacy is respected with near absolute seriousness. Many Americans find themselves recalibrating their understanding of connection. Emotional closeness does not develop quickly, but when it does, it carries a sense of permanence and trust that feels carefully earned. Work culture often becomes the most challenging terrain. Expectations around dedication, punctuality, and collective responsibility exceed what many Americans consider reasonable. Long hours are normalized, not as a display of ambition, but as a signal of loyalty. Personal boundaries between work and private life blur subtly. The emphasis shifts from personal fulfillment to contribution, from individual success to group stability. For some, this creates tension. For others, it offers a sense of purpose that feels grounded rather than performative. Everyday moments continue to reinforce these themes. Restaurants prioritize consistency over customization. Neighborhoods remain quiet well into the evening. Even celebrations feel contained, respectful of surrounding space. Gradually, many Americans begin to sense that the culture is not suppressing emotion, but carefully managing it. Expression exists, but it is layered, contextual, and often delayed. This realization marks a turning point, where the initial culture shock evolves into something more complex and introspective. As this understanding settles in, the transformation becomes visible in subtle ways. Many Americans begin to reassess assumptions they once considered universal. Efficiency is no longer associated with speed, but with coordination. Respect is no longer proven through openness, but through consistency. Personal identity feels less tied to constant expression and more to reliability within a shared system. The culture does not demand admiration, yet it steadily earns it through coherence. There is often a moment when comparison fades. The urge to measure Japan against the United States weakens, replaced by an awareness that the two cultures are built on fundamentally different emotional logics. American life often centers on possibility, movement, and self-definition. Life in Japan emphasizes continuity, balance, and collective endurance. Neither framework is presented as superior, but the contrast reveals how deeply culture shapes perception itself. Many Americans notice that their internal pace changes. Silence becomes less threatening. Waiting feels purposeful rather than wasted. Observation replaces reaction. The surrounding order creates space for reflection, exposing habits that once felt natural but now appear loud or hurried. This shift can feel unsettling, even uncomfortable, as if long-standing instincts are being gently challenged rather than confronted. Over time, the culture shock that once felt external becomes internalized. It is no longer about language barriers or unfamiliar customs, but about altered expectations of how life can be structured. The experience reshapes ideas of success, connection, and fulfillment. Some Americans eventually return home carrying this quiet recalibration with them, finding familiar environments suddenly noisier, looser, less intentional. Others remain, drawn not by novelty, but by the stability and emotional restraint they have learned to value. In this way, the move from the United States to Japan rarely changes life through dramatic moments. Its impact is gradual, cumulative, and deeply psychological. The culture does not announce its lessons. It allows them to surface slowly, through daily routines and unspoken agreements, leaving many Americans permanently aware that there are entire ways of living that exist beyond the boundaries of what once felt normal.